Hello there. I'm the Moonlit Storyteller, and I'm here to keep you company. I know you've come to this video to unwind, maybe even to help you fall asleep. Before we drift off into that peaceful world, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's your way of telling me I'm still here, and I need gentle stories like this. Now, let your mind relax, and let's step into a calm and soothing journey together. My radio crackled to life, the voice barely cutting through the static. Urgent help needed at the park on Grand Avenue. A woman, identity unknown, has been attacked and is in critical condition. Grand Avenue was just a few blocks away. I unlocked my car, quickly hitting the button beside the radio. Understood, I'm on my way. Do you have any details about the nature of the attack? None. The voice responded faintly, the sound of the static growing louder. I reversed my car and sped toward Grand Avenue. In the distance, I could already hear the sirens of other emergency vehicles rushing to the scene. This was serious. Minutes later, I arrived at the scene. Flashing my badge, I passed through the barricade. I moved past the ambulances and emergency vehicles, heading toward a group of personnel in uniform gathered in one spot. A police officer looked up at me and seemed to recognize me, likely from training days. He stepped back, allowing me to see what had caused the disturbance. I let out a soft click of my tongue. Before me lay a woman, her form a twisted mockery of what it once was. I only knew she was a woman because that was what I had been told. Her body was unrecognizable, her skin pierced by thousands of toothpicks, each one driven deep into her flesh. Blood oozed from every puncture, staining her body and pooling on the ground nearby. And she was still alive. Her breath came in ragged, heavy gasps, each one more laborious than the last. A paramedic, standing nearby, turned to me, his voice tinged with sorrow. "This won't last much longer. Why can't we move her?" I asked, my voice steady. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "That's the problem, we can't." He gestured toward the woman. "These toothpicks have barbs at the ends. They can only go deeper, not come out. We don't want to make it worse. We tried to insert an airway tube, but we couldn't." He pointed toward her nose, where more toothpicks had pierced her. I stared at her for a long while. Her chest rose and fell with each laborious breath, pushing the toothpicks deeper into her skin, accelerating the bleeding that had already become catastrophic. I glanced around at the paramedics, their faces now etched with the grim realization that nothing could be done to save her. She was condemned to a slow, painful death, and they were powerless to stop it. I had seen a lot in my career, but nothing like this. Usually, I prided myself on my ability to stay calm in the face of chaos. I could keep a stoic face and control any situation, but not this time. The brutal violence of the attack stirred something inside me, like a vortex threatening to spill out if I wasn't careful. Everything about this scene felt wrong. The human body wasn't meant to endure such torment. A primal instinct tugged at me, urging me to run, to escape the suffocating terror that radiated from the scene. But I couldn't. Despite the fear, I had a duty to fulfill. I turned back to the paramedic. "How was she found?" I asked. He sighed, his expression matching the sorrowful situation. "A passerby called emergency services. We tried everything we could." His voice trailed off and his eyes seemed to wander, unfocused. "Is there anything else I should know?" I pressed. He finally looked at me, but not directly. His eyes seemed glazed, as if staring at something far off, lost in shock. Yes," he replied, his voice distant. "A few items were found next to her." He turned to fetch them, then returned with a small folded paper and a silver wristwatch, handing them to me. The watch immediately caught my attention. It looked familiar. It was one of those typical silver watches, with a 3-link chain, but something about it felt off. The weight and the cool metal pressing against my palm stirred a long-forgotten memory. I could almost remember wearing it years ago, or perhaps someone else did. I flipped the watch over, Two simple letters were engraved on the back, letters that made my stomach drop and the world around me seem to collapse. A.I. Alice Edwards, my sister, was believed to have gone missing over 3 years ago after she left home for a late-night run and never returned, leaving behind a grieving husband and a 4-year-old daughter. The search was eventually called off, with no clues or witnesses to follow. How does one begin the search for someone who has completely disappeared? My mind was filled with questions as I returned to the place she had last been. I forced myself to look past the bloodstains, the broken toothpicks, and the mutilated flesh. I stared into the eyes, the only part of the body unscathed by the dozens of stabs, and I broke down because in that moment, I knew the eyes were red and hollow, but I had seen enough. The woman lying on the ground in front of me was my sister. I thought she was dead, and now I was witnessing her death again, without even recognizing her at first. I turned away from her and everyone else around me. The events were too overwhelming to process, and I knew I had to leave the scene before I collapsed. The grief was unbearable, and the tears were too much to handle. I nodded to the police officers, walked past the crime scene tape, and left once more. As I walked away, I realized I still had a small piece of paper in my hand, one that the medical staff had given me, also found near the body. I unfolded it. "What do you think of my little hedgehog? If you like it, don't worry. My zoo is just getting started. When you've been at this long enough, you'll be sure to witness horrific things. Trust me. I've seen it all." There was the husband who cheated, driving his wife to madness, leading her to commit murder and then suicide. There was a young girl pushed onto the tracks by a stalker. And then my sister, slowly dying in agony, stabbed with thousands of toothpicks all over her body, which led the killer to call her the hedgehog. Yes, as you've probably guessed, that's the case I'm handling right now, trying to figure out how the murderer got away with it. If you think about it, nothing makes sense. First, the toothpicks must have been inserted somewhere else before she was taken to the park and left there to die. There are no witnesses, and then there's the question of the toothpicks themselves. The medical staff at the scene said they couldn't move her because it would only push the toothpicks deeper into her skin, causing more blood loss. So how did the murderer do it? I do have an answer to that, but I don't want to think about it. The toothpicks were likely inserted one by one over several months, perhaps even years, allowing the wounds to heal before the next one was placed. And here's the last troubling question. What does the killer gain from spending months sticking toothpicks into my sister's flesh? Why her? I have no idea. It could have been an act of revenge, so this might just be a random murder. This only deepens my pain. I'm still in shock, realizing my sister survived all these years, and now seeing how she was treated, it's like salt in the wound. Yes, I'm grieving. But the killer left a message saying that my sister was just the beginning, so solving this case has become my top priority. I can't let this happen again. Only when I catch him will I truly be able to mourn. So here I am, sitting in my office, wearing my sister's watch on my wrist and going over the evidence. The next day, after another murder, I received a birthday card with an address written inside, sent directly to me. Forensic analysis showed that the handwriting matched the writing at the crime scene. Receiving a handwritten birthday card was strange, but it raised even more questions. How did the killer know I took on this case? Was he at the scene that night? Maybe he knows it's my sister and is now targeting me. As usual, nothing is clear, but the address is an address, and in my line of work, things like this need to be taken seriously. I picked up the birthday card again and looked at the cartoon giraffe wishing me a happy day. Yeah, the jokes on the card were bizarre. I looked back at the address, 12 Baker Street, as if it held some hidden meaning I hadn't yet figured out, but there was nothing. It seemed like just an address. So I coordinated with my boss to take the team down to Baker Street that night to see if we could find anything. I secretly hoped we wouldn't find anything, that this would be another wild goose chase. I feared what I might discover there. If the opposite happened, that night I arrived at number 12 Baker Street with 3 of the best people I know. Thompson, a muscular guy who can keep calm in any situation. Ramirez, who may not have Thompson's strength but more than makes up for it with his intelligence. His quick thinking has saved us countless times. And Edison, an analyst who, whether on the field or in the office, always catches every detail. I had chosen the best people to face the worst. Baker Street was a row of warehouses in an industrial area on the outskirts of the city. All the warehouses looked the same large rectangular buildings made of red brick. Half of the warehouses were still in operation, producing materials to ship worldwide, while the other half appeared abandoned. Number 12, Baker Street, was one of those. It looked unremarkable, with broken glass, trash piled up outside, cracked bricks in places, and a door slightly off its hinges. But this was it. I gritted my teeth and signaled to the others, slowly stepping through the already open front door. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust to the darkness inside, since I had refused to use a flashlight at that point. I could hear the unmistakable sound of water dripping from the ceiling into an empty container below. The air felt thick and damp, mostly smelling of wet cardboard and something that vaguely resembled metal, blood. The sharp metallic smell hit my nose, overpowering everything else. I continued moving forward, my team following closely behind. Edison looked at me with a raised eyebrow, and I nodded in response. "This is it," I silently told him. "Be ready for anything." We passed through another set of doors into a room dimly lit by a light bulb on the ceiling. In the center of the room, under the light, was a figure. And calling it a figure was an understatement. A human's neck is typically about 10-15 centimeters long, from the shoulders to the chin. The person in front of us had a neck 10 times that length. He was kneeling, with his neck growing out from his shoulders like a vine and curving downward. The neck continued crawling along the floor for about 1.5 meters, ending in a head. When he saw us, he began crawling toward us slowly, dragging both his head and his long, bizarre neck. He moaned in pain as he moved, and I could see blood oozing from the stitches spaced every few centimeters along his neck. As he got closer, blood dripped onto the floor, leaving a fresh red trail with each step. He moaned again, looking up at us, clearly in extreme pain. "What the hell is that?" Ramirez exclaimed from behind me. I kept my eyes locked on the creature. I wasn't sure either. Another animal-themed mutation. It seemed that way. I stood still, watching, unsure of what to do. As he dragged his long neck and body toward us, he locked eyes with me. His mouth opened as though he wanted to speak, but all that came out were ghastly moans. Still, I understood what he was trying to say, his mouth forming a perfect circle as if emphasizing a single word: help. Stepping back mostly out of fear, I knew this creature wouldn't harm me. But deep in my mind, the alarm bells rang incessantly. This was not natural. Humans shouldn't look like this. I needed to leave now. I could sense my team behind me also tensing up and stepping back, likely feeling the same way. The creature continued dragging itself forward, leaving a trail of blood behind, each movement slower and weaker. Life seemed to be draining from him. I was witnessing the final moments of a person being tortured to the point of death again. A voice echoed, distorted and fragmented, likely coming from the speaker system. It sounded calm, even cheerful, as if everything unfolding was perfectly normal. "Welcome, everyone, to the newest attraction at the zoo. Behold the human, a beautiful giraffe, crafted by slowly tearing apart each section of his neck and replacing it with larger, more fitting pieces of human skin." I cringed. This didn't sound pleasant at all. A gradual process, yes, but look at the result. Isn't it much more beautiful than the original shape, don't you think, Jonathan? I instinctively looked up. It was my name. I wanted to thank him for volunteering a perfect specimen to add to my collection. I knew he would appreciate the wonderful things I had prepared for him. The voice paused, and in that instant, I realized two things. A sharp metallic noise rang out from the right, across the room. A gunshot sounded to the left, and Thompson's leg jerked back, causing him to collapse. Blood poured from a wound just above his knee, a bullet injury. I did what anyone facing an invisible sniper in the room would do. I crouched down and scrambled for cover, Fear was my driving force, and I was terrified. I found a pile of boxes to hide behind, shielding me from the sniper's view. I froze, my chest heaving with adrenaline and dread, assessing the situation. Thompson lay motionless on the floor, possibly unconscious from hitting his head when he fell. Edison was right next to me, also hiding behind the boxes. I couldn't see Ramirez anywhere, and the sniper was still at large. Things were falling apart quickly. Then the overhead lights abruptly went out, quickening the pounding of my heart. The panic of being plunged into darkness overwhelmed me. Suddenly, I heard footsteps just ahead, near Thompson. It could be Ramirez trying to help him, or the sniper finishing the job. I hoped it was Ramirez. Another set of footsteps sounded heavier, louder. There were more of them. I considered rushing to Thompson, dragging him away, but he was too heavy. I turned to Edison to see if he had a plan. The lights flickered back on, and I scanned the room. The unfortunate giraffe-like creature lay lifeless on the floor, either dead or close to it. Ramirez was slumped against a crate far away, barely clinging to life. Thompson had vanished, and the sniper was nowhere to be found. Edison helped me carry Ramirez to the vehicle. He was covered in bruises, looking like he'd just been through a violent fight, but for the most part, he was still breathing. I couldn't say the same for the giraffe man. We thoroughly searched the warehouse, but found nothing. It appeared to have been cleaned out beforehand, or maybe it had never been used. Everything was hard to make sense of. Thompson was gone, replaced by a creature with a neck almost 7 meters long. Thompson was out there somewhere, in a monstrous form I couldn't dare imagine. Ramirez was in the hospital, battered beyond recognition. Edison was in shock, understandably. I was terrified. Everyone was terrified. But the most haunting part was the voice coming through the speakers. They had said that the giraffe's neck was made from larger pieces of human flesh, as if it was constructed from multiple people. And based on the length of the neck, it was many people, far more than just one. There were others out there, many others. I should begin by saying that I was no longer a detective. After the warehouse incident, I was called in to meet with my superior, Sergeant Langley. As I entered, she was sitting behind a mahogany desk, absorbed in a file. She looked up and said, "What the hell happened, Jonathan?" "We weren't prepared enough, ma'am," I replied. She narrowed her eyes at me across the desk. "We have one missing person and one severely injured. How unprepared are we talking? You had no contingency plans?" "With all due respect, ma'am, you weren't there," I said, my voice tinged with frustration. "Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw there. You think AI would stay calm in that situation?" She sighed, glancing back at the file, her eyes scanning the text. She wanted me to take some time off. "Seriously, Mom?" She raised her hand to stop me. "Listen, the media is making a big deal out of this for everyone's sake, including yours." She pointed toward me. "You'd be better off stepping away from this for now." I stared at her. She returned the gaze, raising an eyebrow. After a moment, I reluctantly handed over my badge and gun. Langley smiled again. "It's all right. This will all blow over. Just take some time off, okay?" I didn't respond as I left her office. It was noon, and I had nothing else to do but worry about what had happened. So I went home and slept. After everything that had transpired over the past few days, I was utterly drained. I woke up to the sound of the doorbell ringing. Still groggy, I pulled the pillow over my head, hoping the person at the door would leave. The bell rang again, and I turned in bed to check the clock. It was 4 p.m. I was more tired than I thought. The bell rang once more. I slowly got out of bed and made my way to the door, my eyes still not fully awake. When I opened it, a skinny, curly-haired teenager, about 18 years old, was standing there, smiling politely at me. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice rough. Right. I've been hired to drive you somewhere. I mean, if you want to go," he said. I studied him, trying to figure out if he was telling the truth. "Is that so?" He shrugged. "I'm not really sure. Someone paid me $500 to ask if you wanted to come with me. But you don't have to. They told me to tell you the decision's yours." A flash of realization crossed his face. "Oh, right, I have this for you too." He handed me a carefully folded piece of paper. I opened it and read the scrawled handwriting inside. "Heard you lost your job. You should come work for my zoo. We're always looking for more animal keepers." The teen looked at me over the paper. "So, what's it going to be? Are you coming?" I stared at him, unsure of what to say. How did someone know I'd lost my job? It had only just happened. This was clearly a trap. The kid could be in on it. The last time I followed a note like this, I lost someone and almost lost another. So, should I go or stay? I turned back to the teenager. "All right, I'll go." He drove cautiously, the kind of careful driving you'd expect from a novice. We traveled for a long while, slowly leaving the city behind and heading into the desolate countryside. After about half an hour on empty roads, the land grew quieter and more isolated. Finally, he stopped the car at the entrance to a large farm. I saw the sign as we turned in. Winston Family Farm. The road split in two, and he chose the right path, leading to a rustic farmhouse. The lights inside came on, and I could hear machinery running in the large shed behind it. The teen stopped the car. "This is where you get out. Have a great evening," he said cheerfully, giving me enough time to get out of the car before he turned and drove off. I watched as the car's headlights disappeared over the horizon, then climbed the steps to the front door. Inside, I could hear voices, laughter like any family at dinner time. Not sure what to do, I knocked on the door. The talking stopped. I heard soft footsteps on the wooden floor approaching the door. It opened. A man appeared, tall and medium build, with short cropped hair and stubble. He looked at me with a distant gaze, then smiled and gestured for me to come in. "I'm glad you made it. Dinner's ready. Come in and eat with us," he said. His voice was warm and familiar. Very familiar, I knew him. He began almost accusingly. Memories flashed back to the night I found my sister's body. The medical worker had handed me the note, setting everything in motion. The one who always seemed to look off into the distance. No, not just look search. He tilted his head slightly. "Oh, I'm glad to hear that. It makes making friends a lot easier. Well, you look like you're hungry. Come on in." I didn't move. There was no way I was eating with him. I yelled at him. "You killed my sister!" He looked at me with confusion. No, I didn't do that. I'm just the caretaker. You've misunderstood, she. I don't care what you say." I cut him off. "Come on, let's settle this over dinner. I'm serious, come in." He turned and walked down the hall, taking a left into a room I assumed was the dining area. I heard some murmurs and the scraping of chairs. It seemed like everyone else had already left. I had two choices. I could go in and figure out what was going on, or I could leave and forget about it all. There was one problem, though, I would never forget. The pain would never go away. The horrors I'd witnessed couldn't be erased. I walked into the room where the medical worker had gone earlier. Inside, a large table was set for what looked like a big family dinner. A roasted lamb sat in the center, several slices already cut, surrounded by side dishes and drinks. A man sat at the head of the table, directly facing me. It looked like everyone else had left. The man spoke, his voice deep and authoritative. "It's good that we can finally meet, Jonathan. I have so much to tell you." And who was he? I continued for about another 20 minutes until I heard the sound of an engine behind me. Turning around, I saw a vehicle appearing on the horizon, heading in the same direction as I was. It was a great Momenta, worn-out green Chevy, roaring over the gravel and kicking up clouds of dust. I raised my thumb to wave. In that moment, I probably didn't look like someone anyone would want to pick up barefoot with only one arm. But there was no harm in trying. I hoped it was just a kind farmer heading into town for some shopping. As the Chevy approached, the driver sized me up before pulling over. I opened the door and climbed into the passenger seat, thanking him. He turned to look at me, or rather, past me. He had short, close-cropped hair, a scruffy beard, and eyes that seemed distant, as though he couldn't stop or was searching for something far beyond the car. Ah, the nurse from before, I said as I opened the door to leave. I won't be doing this again. I'd rather walk home. The nurse took a few steps toward me, blocking my way, forcing me to walk around his car to keep going. I stopped, and he stepped out, waving at me. "Hey, Jonathan," he called. I didn't respond, and he came closer, extending his hand. I didn't take it. I let it hang there for a moment before letting it drop. "Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. I'm Michael. It's good to see you again." "The pleasure's yours," I responded with a sharp tone. He gazed blankly into the distance. "So, did you call 911? I couldn't let you do that." "How did I know?" he asked. He shrugged. "The GPS device in your arm. It tells us where you are and interferes with your phone signal. I attached it while you were out cold." "So it wasn't just the signal," I muttered. He adjusted his stance, leaning against the car. "Let's be clear, Jonathan. Come back with us. You clearly can't be trusted not to turn back. Our police will handle this fairly. We're not here to hurt you. You said you'd work for us. Come back." "And how exactly are you planning to stop me?" I asked, bracing myself for a confrontation. The man shook his head, looking weary. He pulled the keys from his pocket, pressed a button on the fob. The shock hit me, sending waves of pain through my body, growing stronger with each pulse. Michael released the button. "I forgot to mention, the tracking device has a protection feature. You just experienced level 3A. Trust me, you won't want to try level 8. He tapped his eye. "It messes with everything inside you, and level 10? That kills you instantly." I instinctively glanced at my right arm, where somewhere inside was a tiny, lethal device. "So Jonathan, do you want to come back?" I had little choice. The ride back was silent. Every time Michael tried to strike up a conversation, I responded in monosyllables, making it clear I didn't want to be here. He drove me down the narrow road, passing farms. An old, thin man sat on the porch, waiting for my return. He knew I would be coming back. He said I had a choice, but the truth was, I never did. The talk about choice was just a psychological game. The old man stood up to greet me as I got out of the car. "Jonathan, you're back. I'm glad to see you again." He waved me into the house. "Come in. I've got a lot to talk about. Others are having breakfast." I followed him into the dining room, the place where I first met him. Around the table, there were about 19 people having breakfast bacon, eggs, and other morning fare. I recognized most of them. There was Sergeant Langley, spreading butter on toast. She smiled and waved. Edison sat next to her, pouring milk into his glass. He looked away, avoiding my gaze. Maybe he was ashamed to be here. There were others, too. People I'd seen in the industry nurses, cops, politicians, journalists, doctors, and surgeons, all gathered in the house of someone with a dark past. The man clapped his hands from behind me. "All right, everyone, let's welcome Jonathan. He's our newest guest. But we're still waiting for more. Welcome, Jonathan." A chorus of voices greeted me. I scanned the room, my throat dry, choking on the words. It was overwhelming. He turned and motioned for me to follow. He led me through the house, pointing out each room and explaining the layout. A kitchen, 2 living rooms, 3 bathrooms spread across 2 floors. There were a few bedrooms, but it seemed everyone slept in tents outside. Then he took me down to the basement. "This is where the action happens," he winked. Everything was just as I left it. A large operating table stood in the center of the room, surrounded by various machines and tools. There was a stark contrast between the sterile equipment on one side and the sharp implements hanging from hooks on the other. And in the middle were the cameras, mounted on tripods around the room. I looked more closely at the cameras. What were they for? I asked the old man, chuckling. "What do you think? How do I get paid for all this?" I turned to face him, the pieces starting to fit together in my head. He was selling videos of people enduring extreme situations. He laughed. "You've got it. Shock content, really popular in some parts of the internet. Of course, that's not my main reason for doing this, but it helps support my goals. Your video made about 5,000. I get paid to make videos, and it's a never-ending cycle. Perfect. You've seen the fruits of this system firsthand. The old man nodded toward the door, still labeled unfinished. He continued, "That's where I keep the unfinished work. Of course, it's empty now, shame. It was nearly finished, one of my best yet. But that's all right, we've got something new on the way." I shuddered hearing him talk about the work as if it was just another task. It made me feel sick. No way. Someone who did this every day and thought of himself as a good person. There was one more thing that lingered in my mind. He once said that the night my sister was taken, she did something I didn't know about. He went silent for a moment. "How close are you with your sister?" I shrugged. "Pretty close. We talk once a month and visit each other on Christmas. Do you know what she did? She was studying some kind of advanced anesthetic, but she didn't succeed. She did it," the old man said simply. He paused, letting me absorb it before continuing. "I met Alice on an online forum. From the start, she fascinated me. She spoke about the world's decay and a plan for rebirth, to restore humanity. She had many plans, Jonathan. Everything you see here is the result of her research. When we met, it was instant harmony. She was perfect, intelligent, and belonged to me." "So why did you kill her?" I asked. I saw his eyes blur as if he was about to cry. "The anesthetic didn't work as intended. Instead of dulling the pain, it amplified it. The mechanism went beyond my capacity. But even a small dose caused excruciating pain, as though every atom of her body was being burned. Death would have been a relief, but there was a side effect. Death became impossible once the drug took effect. She had to suffer. So all the people I had seen. I left the question hanging. It was easy to manipulate the AI bodies when they were no longer able to resist, and death was no longer an option. Alice wanted to be the first. I begged her not to, saying there were others more suited for it, but she was adamant. We staged the kidnapping with no evidence because there was no struggle, nothing at all. She came to this farm and became the first on that operating table. It took years to insert each needle into her skin. While she was under, she endured and kept sharing ideas I had never considered. He paused, his body trembling with each shallow breath. She told me to find those in power, and if they didn't join willingly, to force them. They would soon realize we were working for the good of humanity. And the last thing she said before I laid her down in the park was, "Find him, hire him, change his vision." And now, here you are. I stood frozen in silence, not knowing what to say. Everything I had known about my sister was suddenly shattered. Maybe the old man was lying. My sister couldn't have been the fanatical, sadistic person he described. That person wasn't her. Yet everything seemed to make sense. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't find a way to dismiss it either. He was right, and I knew it. The man looked back at me. "Come on, Jonathan, there's one more thing you need to see." He led me out of the basement through the back door. He passed by a large vegetable garden and rows of small, closely placed tents, most of which were empty. It seemed like they were expecting more people. I followed him through an area with a fire pit, logs stacked in a circle around it, and towards a large barn behind the farm. The barn was painted in a classic red with a sloping roof and large white doors. Inside, there were various loud sounds, moans, and even the scraping of metal, as if a massive machine or many people were inside. "Here," the old man pointed at the barn, "this is my masterpiece, the work of my life. This is the beginning of the vision Alice had for the world. This is where your initiation will take place, and you'll become a true keeper of the beasts. You'll learn how to bring justice and guide the world into the new era." He stepped ahead and opened the large doors for me to take a quick look inside. The air inside was dark and suffocating. "Welcome, Jonathan," he said loudly, "to the human zoo." I stepped inside. The stench hit me like a tidal wave. A foul odor of blood and decaying flesh filled the space. It made me want to vomit, my mind spinning as I struggled to breathe the fresh air. It was futile. My stomach twisted painfully, the nausea rising up my throat. I turned to the side and vomited onto the floor, my gaze falling on the mess below. I wasn't the first. Cages lined up in rows, stretching from one wall to the other. Each cage seemed to hold a person, most of them looking lifeless. Every cage bore a label with the name of a different creature. There was a worm, its limbs severed, the body sliced into sections a few inches apart, forced to crawl on its head. There were dogs and cats with long needles in place of whiskers, their limbs cut off below the elbows and knees, forced to crawl on all fours. Humans and other animals had body parts twisted or elongated, transformed into various grotesque forms. They no longer resembled anything capable of surviving. The inhabitants of the human zoo were filthy, ragged, packed tightly into the confined space, fed pieces of what appeared to be rotting flesh, just enough to keep them alive. As I passed, their eyes met mine with a sad plea, silently begging for freedom like Thompson had once asked. Broken and battered, they seemed to have accepted their fate, resigned to spend the rest of their lives here. There was no resistance, no fight left in them. They had surrendered entirely. This place was nothing short of hell. It was hard to think clearly with the stench overwhelming my senses, clouding my vision with dark patches. My heart pounded fiercely in my chest, the horrors before me rendering my mind numb. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. It was too much to bear. The old man continued to walk ahead. This is where I keep the current specimens before deciding to place them in the holding cells, and this is where you and all the zookeepers will work. Feed them, continue evolving them, and clean the cells. My blood boiled. The old man didn't care about the pain he inflicted. Nothing could shake him. He treated humans like animals. This was inhumane. I screamed. He looked back at me with disappointment in his eyes. Look at them. They are animals. It's all for the ideal. Eventually, they'll rejoice knowing they were the first step in the evolution of humanity. He led me to a large pit in the middle of the warehouse, about 10 meters wide and 5 meters deep, with no way to climb in or out. This is where we keep the animals before. You've proven yourself worthy. Your initiation begins here. I felt a strong shove to my back, propelling me forward into the pit. My legs followed the momentum, and I instinctively shielded my head with my remaining arm, hoping to brace the fall with my knees before rolling away. I crashed down with a violent impact, pain shooting through my body, forcing me flat onto the floor. I lay still, gasping for breath, my chest tight, my knee aching as though it had shattered. I tilted my head to take in my surroundings. A dusty pit in the middle of the warehouse, the place where humans came to die. Nothing remarkable about it. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. Something was circling me, walking with an exaggerated gait, struggling to maintain balance, each step echoing loudly in the pit. I slowly stood up, despite the pain. Turning to get a clearer view, the first thing I noticed was that the creature had no neck. Its head stopped at its shoulders. Then I realized it had no eyelids, its wide eyes locked onto mine, studying my every move. The third thing I saw was its sharp, steel-like claws extending from its fingertips. Then it spread its wings, revealing a patch of human skin stitched under its arms. It stared at me for a moment, tilting its head, hands raised provocatively, before twisting its head 180 degrees. I was facing a human owl. The creature lunged at me, its claws aimed directly at my chest. I rolled away once more, feeling the terror that had been consuming me for days. I wasn't quick enough. Its claws shredded my clothes like they were butter, leaving 3 deep gashes across my chest. I ignored the pain and quickly turned back to face the owl. Letting my guard down meant certain death. The owl still stared, its large eyes filled with deep hatred. In a panic, I leaped back to avoid another strike. But then I realized that if I wanted to survive, I had to act now. The longer I delayed, the weaker I would become, and the chances of survival would slip away. I charged toward one of its wings, hoping to take it down. It dodged. In that moment of misjudgment, I forgot that there was still a human inside, fighting for survival just like me. I rolled back, springing to my feet. The owl charged at me again, claws raised. My first instinct was to avoid the attack, but I forced myself to suppress it. The owl would anticipate that. Instead, I waited until the last possible moment and then charged at it. As it closed in, I caught it off guard. The owl staggered and fell, overwhelmed by my weight. I pressed my finger between its head and neck, starting to sever the threads that held them together. The owl struggled, realizing what I was doing. It dropped to its knees, trying to claw at me, but couldn't reach due to its wings being in the way. I continued to slice through each stitch, feeling the tension ease as I worked. Just moments later, I would be free. The owl's movements grew weaker. It seemed to understand that it had lost the fight. With one final pull, I removed the last thread, and its head slipped away, blood dripping in steady drops. I tossed the head aside and collapsed in exhaustion. When I woke up, I was in a bedroom, my chest throbbing in pain. I sat up, pulling the blanket off, to reveal 3 large scars on my chest, sore and tender to the touch, though they had clearly been treated by someone. Looking out the nearby window, I saw that it was already night. There was no sound in the house, so I assumed everyone was sleeping outside in the tents, except for the old man. He was sitting in a chair, simply watching me sleep. A psychological game. The old man stared at me as I stood up, raising an eyebrow. I slowly walked toward him, despite the pain. He clasped his hands together. "Well done. You've become one of the keepers now." I kept walking. "Have you ever wondered why I did all of this? It's for all of humanity. I do this for the people of Earth. Humans are the most noble creatures, and I treat them as such. With my guidance and your help, humanity will enter a new era, a new age of evolution." I kept moving closer. "This was your brother's vision first, and then it became mine. I'm eager to see it become yours." The old man shifted in his chair. "This isn't the only zoo out there. We've spread our philosophy, and we are united. But if you keep trying to kill me, you'll continue the cycle. You'll follow your sister's path and lead the world to salvation." Without hesitation, I grabbed the jar from the bedside table and charged at him, weapon raised. Fear flashed in his eyes. He clearly hadn't expected me to actually do it. In a panic, he fumbled for his keychain. I smashed the jar into his head. He quickly pressed a button on the keychain, sending a surge of electricity through my body. The pain was far worse than anything I had ever felt. Each shock caused my body to convulse. I fought against the pain, trying to get to the button, but I couldn't move, let alone think. Level 10 will kill you instantly. My vision went white. I felt my insides shaking, the pain relentless and unforgiving. This was how it would end. The electricity burned through my organs, turning them into mush. Then it stopped. It took a moment for my sight to return, though it remained blurry. The old man was still lying on the floor, alive but unconscious. A shard of the jar was embedded in his head, blood dripping down my face. I pulled the shard out and slashed it across his throat. It wasn't the death he deserved, but it was the end he earned. Stumbling out of the room, I saw Edison pouring something that looked like gasoline onto the floor. I tensed, ready for another fight. Edison set the gasoline down and raised his hands. "Hey, take it easy. I'm the one who helped you get out of there. Without me, you'd be dead by now." I studied his face and believed him. I lowered my guard. Edison continued, "I hate this place too, but I never got a chance to strike back. What you did was brave." "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm going to blow this damn hellhole to pieces," he said simply. We worked in silence and darkness for hours. Edison had nearly finished with the farm, so we moved to the storage shed, and then the tents. Finally, we reached Michael's car, and Edison handed me a lit match. It was clear he wanted me to do it. I didn't care anymore. Let it all burn. I threw the match into the gasoline and quickly drove off with Edison before the small flame erupted into a raging inferno. We were about 2 miles away when the night sky lit up with a flash of white. It was all over. Edison looked at me. "So, where do we go now?" I glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing the horizon engulfed in flames, the sound of sirens approaching from a distance. Someone must have called them. I looked ahead at the long gravel road, pondering Edison's question about where we were headed.